Okay, so welcome everybody. We are back again with a beautiful and power-packed session. So I welcome all the participants as well as the viewers to Global Interdisciplinary Summit 2020, co-hosted by Global Outreach Medical and Health Association. So after a huge power-packed session from Dr. Komal, we're having Dr. Michael with us for the next session. So for the participants, I would like to guide everyone that for the C certificates, for the speaker schedule, and for the participation certificates, you all can log into www.gomha.org. And as well as there'll be a link provided with the session, and you all can follow that, registering for it and putting a seminar screenshot, which will be acting as a proof for your attendance. So with this, I would like to move on to introduce our speaker of the day, Dr. Michael. Dr. Michael is an assistant clinical professor at Loma Linda University, a clinical instructor at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and maintains a practice limited to prosthodontics and implant dentistry in Sonora, California. He's a fellow of the American College of Prosthodontics, has published articles, DVD training series, and full-on courses related to implant dentistry, clinical prosthodontics, digital technology, with a special emphasis on implant overdentures. As an avid technology and computer hobbyist, Doctor is involved in digital implant dentistry that has led him to develop and utilize new technology with CAD/CAM surgical systems, implement interactive CBCT implant plannings, and outside-of-the-box radiographic imaging concepts. Doctor also maintains 5 YouTube channels: Learn Locator, Learn LODI, Learn Saturno, Learn Locator FTX, The 3D Dentist, etc. They are the popular YouTube channels on standard and narrow diameter dental implant procedures and digital dentistry. So with this, I wholeheartedly welcome Dr. Michael with us for the session, and kindly all the participants just enjoy the session with this. So the stage is all yours.
Dr. Coral, thank you very much. And I sincerely wanted to go ahead and thank everybody from Global Outreach, Dr. Keener Shah, and the Global Implant Association as well, for being able to go ahead and provide this opportunity for us to go ahead and talk a little bit about some interesting things that we can do in implant dentistry. And specifically 3D printing with a variety of implant and restorative dentistry. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quick here. Click on that there. And Dr. Coral, are we seeing our screen okay? Just wanted to double check before we get started.
That's quite perfect. So we can go ahead with it.
Perfect. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in here this morning here in California. I know it's a little bit on the later side throughout the world and lots of different time zones for everybody tuning into this global outreach. But, you know, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. It's getting started with 3D printing. And I know many of you that are connected with me, as well as folks that do kind of know my background. I've been kind of going with 3D printing for over 15 years or so now, a variety of different scales and different implementations. However, you know, desktop level 3D printing has been really only about the past 8 years or so, give or take. And this is just going to be a little bit of our journey, as well as how can you get started with 3D printing in your clinical practices, your universities and clinics, wherever you come from around the world. Let's click on this here, and that should go. There we go. So a little bit of background information about me. I'm in full-time clinical practice in Northern California. And Dr. Coral's done a beautiful job just talking about the rest of my background, so I don't need to go into it. But the key is that there's a balance between what we can do in private practice versus the university setting. And I knew that I was going to be having a lot of friends connecting here from India. And India is very near and dear to our hearts. My wife and I, we've had the opportunity to go over twice, and what a brilliant country that it is. And the first time we went over, we had a chance to go to the wonderful town or city, I should say, is like, you know, how many millions of people, but in the city of Nagpur. And in Nagpur, we were able to go to several of the government dental colleges as well as the private universities to be able to go ahead and spread the education and understanding of implant dentistry. And then the second time around, I had the rare opportunity, wonderful opportunity of going to the wedding of my good colleague friend, Dr. Nakul Ratti, where we had the opportunity to go see just an incredible Indian wedding. So it was really, really a spectacular experience. So just such a warm and incredible culture. And wherever we went to in the country, from the person that just had everything from the person that had nothing, they welcomed us with open arms. So it's really incredible. Some additional online resources for this presentation as well. Go check out my website, michaelschererdmd.com / either publications or YouTube if you want to check out some of my YouTube channels. I have all my publications that are published in PDF form and a variety of different things that I've published here over the years. Many of those are on 3D printing. Additionally, I encourage you to check out our website, fasttrackdentalce.com, if you want to learn a little bit more about 3D printing, clear aligner therapy. Just as a quick little plug here for us, we do maintain some formal online courses where you can get certificates from University of Nevada, Las Vegas, which is a certificate of completion and course completion, if you're interested. And then additionally, connect with me on social media, Fast Track Dental CE and fasttrackdentalce.com. You're always welcome to send me a message. I'm always there. So the question is that not necessarily about Dr. Scherer. I'm not going to talk necessarily too much about my background with 3D printing, because it's more importantly to talk about how you get started with 3D printing. So you attending the seminar and listening to our presentation, you're sitting there saying to yourself, how can I get started with 3D printing? And 3D printing is kind of a new, but it's not a new concept. And it's really all about the idea of how to go ahead and do things from the digital sense. We have to go ahead and create the need for utilizing new technology. Because let's be frank for a second here for a moment. 3D printing is not new. Not many of us know this, but 3D printing has been around since about 1980, 84, somewhere in that range. Some of the earlier adaptations and prototyping of 3D printing first came out. And it was interesting, back in December of 2019, I had this incredible experience of meeting Mr. Chuck Hull, the original, who many attribute the original pioneer and inventor of stereolithography and 3D printing. And we had a chance to sit and talk about his background and his story. And I'll be writing an article on this for one of the dental journals here in the United States, which will be published in November, Compendium. If anybody wants to connect with me, I'll send you that article. So the goal is that if we look back and we think about what a computer looked like back in the early to mid 1980s, I mean, are you kidding me? The thought of being able to generate a physical object from nothing seems so Star Trek and Space Age at the time. But in many ways, it started out as a clinical need. Those first few prints weren't necessarily patient-specific things because they were just learning. But very quickly after, stereolithography was applied to dentistry. And some of the earliest 3D printing dental applications were at Loma Linda, where they were 3D printing in the implant dentistry clinic, stereolithography models, or rapid prototyping, they called it at the time, models of mandibles for doing things with subperiosteal dental implants. It was incredibly crude and rudimentary at the time. But forget the technology for a second, because if we think about the clinical aspect of it, how it works in my practice is that we have a clinical need. We have a clinical need for us to go ahead and do something with technology, whether it's scanning or printing or milling or radiography. First time you use a cone beam, maybe it's for doing implant dentistry. I'm a firm believer that necessity is the mother of development. And if you look back at history too, and you look at something, I'll go back one slide here for a second. You look back at history, you recognize that necessity is our driving force and our driving factor. So here's a patient who came to my office, had a denture. And as a prosthetist, I do a fair number of dentures. I just love them. There's something about them. I absolutely love them, especially with implants. A couple of implants for overdentures, things of that nature. But this patient came to my office because she says, doctor, I've seen 2 or 3 other dentists and they've tried making me a new denture and it just doesn't work. I said, okay, well, tell me your story. She told me her story. This denture that you see on the screen is her denture that was made in like 1962 or 63 or something like that. And, she didn't really think it was that comfortable. So she opened up a Sears and Roebuck catalog or whatever it was back then. And she ordered a self-reline kit. Keep in mind, this is 1962. Ordered a self-reline kit. And in 1963, she realigned her own denture, and here it is. It's been in her mouth for that long. So I'm surprised it looks this good. So she says to me, she says, okay, I've been wearing this denture for this period of time. She told me about the catalog and realigning the denture. So, wow, you're pretty good. She goes, well, I'm pretty crafty, and she was pleased. She smiled and we got that connection going. And then I said to her, I said, okay, well, what would you like me to do? She said, well, I've had a couple of dentists try now, and all I want them to do is just copy this denture. I said, well, what do you mean? She says, I'm really happy with this denture. It's just old and I'm worried it's going to crack someday. And I said, all right, that seems logical. She says, I've had these 2 or 3 dentists try these things to show me the bag. And she says, it's not even close to what it is. And I took a look at her mouth and she went, and the occlusion, everything was so clinically incorrect. Like if I would have shown that back in, my dental college or my university and my board exams, I would have failed miserably. My professor would have thrown it against the wall and said, you need to start over. But she was so happy with it, so happy with it. And I said, okay, we can send a person to the moon in the 1960s, but we can't duplicate somebody's denture in the year 2020. What sort of crazy world is this? And I said to her, I said, well, are those dentists that are making the molds? And they said, no, that denture is wrong. We have to change the bite, do all this. I said, well, let me see if I can go ahead and work with this in 3D printing. And we'll come back to this story as well, because we were able to make this happen. I was able to use this clinical need to go ahead and scan the denture, then 3D print her an exact copy of this denture. And she's still wearing it to this day. And it's really, really incredible. So if you take a look at digital technologies, we know that many of us got started with generating a paper document with what you see here on your computer screen with the typewriter on the left. But how many of us would go back to the typewriter when we have, the Windows or Macintosh computer with Pages or Word on it? You get to the end of the document, you hit the backspace key a couple times, and it's not going to, make a white smudge mark on the paper. We'll be able to make something and easily change it. And additionally, the same thing is true of dentistry. We know that dentistry, there's nothing wrong with using a typewriter. There's nothing wrong with using PVS, which is the typewriter. That workflow works. You can generate some of the finest literary works in the entire world using a pen and paper or typewriter. Same thing is true. You can generate the finest dentures and crowns using PVS and traditional methods. But how many of us would go back to that when we have intraoral scanning and 3D printing? And that's really the takeaway here today too, as well. But also, let's talk a little bit about what holds us back as dentists, as clinicians, as technicians, etc. What holds us back from getting involved with digital technology and especially 3D printing is usually 3 things. Number 1, the money. There's no question that the money and the expense of this equipment is significantly more expensive than just saying buying a thing of PVS or alginate or whatever. That one's, of course, just it is what it is. The good news is that 10 years ago or so, when I was thinking about getting involved with 3D printing in my own office, in my own environment, things of that nature, I contacted several people and they said, well, you need about a $30,000 US. Okay, but think about how many things you can justify that cost with, because, if you print your own surgical guides, your own crown and bridge models, oh my goodness, you'll be paying this thing back quickly. I said, $30,000 for a 3D printer? Forget it. And then, Formlabs and some of the earlier desktop level 3D printers in 2011, 2012 started to drop. And those prices were in that kind of like $3,000 to $5,000 US range, which was significantly more accessible to myself as a clinician. And that's when things really started to get very interesting in dental 3D printing space. Access to the technology is a big part of it too, as well. And certainly, access to digital technology is a significant factor. But it's also access to thinking outside of the box, being able to change your mind a little bit to say, you know what, I think I can make that work. Also being able to access high-speed internet, even though I'm presenting here from California, it's coming through pretty decently. I only have like a 10 or 15 megabit internet connection. It's like nothing. Here I am in California, 2 hours away from Facebook and Google, and my internet is slower than, parts of Nagpur or, wherever you are in the whole world. And I'm not saying that to be funny. I'm just saying that you can be halfway across the world and have a faster internet connection than where I am, even though I'm so much close proximity to some of the leading tech parts of the world. So it's all really how my mind handles the access to the digital technology and how fast I can work with it as well. So that part's critical. The indifference of it too is also important, because if you've been practicing dentistry the same way for the past 20, 30 years, what happens is that, it's tough to make that assertion and that next step of saying, okay, I know I can go ahead and do this, versus, I know Scherer's got it figured out, but he's all the way over in California. I'm here in Australia, Malaysia, China, wherever you're tuning in from, and saying to yourself, okay, can I do it here? And now the good thing is since I've had a chance to travel a lot of different parts of the world, including India, including Australia, and parts of Singapore, China, different parts. And I got to tell you, it's just incredible and inspiring to see what people are capable of. And I was blown away by the capability of what people were doing at the government dental colleges and VSPM and the other colleges in Nagpur and in Mumbai, Singapore, different parts of the countries and world, and what people are able to do is just incredible. And it's all about being makers. What we are as dentist clinicians, we're makers. But we're also a little bit cautious. We're conservative because we're kind of afraid of the next step. We know it works for Scherer, but is it going to work for me here where I live and where I work? And it comes down to the biggie, which is digital fear. It's not necessarily fear of a scary movie, but fear of the unknown, fear of, can I make it work for me? And that part's important. And what happens is that, here's a story too, the same thing. This is just a picture of myself with my laboratory technician in California. And this is an example of somebody who is just so skilled clinically. This is my dental technician. He's been a dental technician for 35 years, removable dental technician. And he does not know the difference between the right and mouse click button. When I ask him to say, hey, Chris, could you go ahead and click on something? He goes, wait, do I do this run or this one? And but he really knows teeth and he really knows dentistry. So we work off of each other really well. And that part's critical. Part is super important, because when you're thinking about jumping into digital dentistry and 3D printing, rely upon those that have figured it out also. If you are the type of person like myself that is like, okay, I grew up with video games, playing Nintendo, Mario, and man, if you can make Mario jump from here to here in that one level, you can figure out 3D printing. Yeah, okay, that was my story. But what happens is that, that wasn't Chris's story. So he and I work so well together. That's kind of how I would envision many of you that are also getting started with 3D printing that may or may not know the digital technology, but dentistry really well. Find somebody that knows digital technology pretty well. Maybe somebody that doesn't know what the internet was before social media and Facebook. That's something to consider. There's something to be said about that. So when we talk about 3D workflows, as I mentioned before, a big part of how I got started with 3D printing and digital dentistry was this. It was a pathological condition of video game use. And, I was so funny too, because at the time, and I see these posts still on Facebook and on social media, they're like, wow, my kid doesn't know how to add. Oh, they should be with times tables and figuring all this stuff out. Here I was in like 1985, and my teacher's like, you need to learn cursive and you need to learn how to do arithmetic. And I'm like, well, I didn't have an iPhone at the time, but I said, look, I've got a calculator. I don't need to do that. And at the time, everybody thought I was just a real jerk. But what's funny is that nowadays it's like, okay, most of these skills are shifting. Now, as the educator and the university professor that I am, there is still some fundamental knowledge about using some basic mathematics and understanding how to spell. And that's going to make you a lot more efficient with digital technology. But it's like, in the future, who knows? I'll be able to talk into my phone and out it spits in Hindi, or out it spits in Mandarin. So I don't know, maybe I don't necessarily need to spend too much time, because, my wife, she speaks Spanish fluently, but I can barely handle English just as it is. So anyways, video games. Video games is how I got started, but this is first how I got started with 3D dentistry. As crazy as it sounds, when some of these earlier games in the early 90s, I don't know exactly when this came out, but a lot of the early 3D games were just really, really tough. I mean, if you can make Mario jump from here to here, you can figure out 3D printing. But it's also important for us to talk a little bit about how that corollary applies to dentistry, because there's not much of a difference between the 3D Mario and how we work in digital dentistry, because Mario has really built a series of triangles, a series of structures, and we reconstruct him in 3 dimensions. And we do the same thing also with our digital dentistry applications as well. So taking a look at some of the digital versus the analog workflows, there's no question that analog workflows do work. They're accurate. They've been around for a long period of time. You have low initial costs. You buy a tube of or a jar of alginate or a tube of PVS. It's so much cheaper than buying an intraoral scanner and 3D printer. Okay. And it's also initially simpler. You just take some stuff, mix it up in the mouth, pop it out. There you go. There's your mold. But then when you're thinking, oh, I need to take a scanner and I got to hook up a laptop to it, the USB-A, USB-C, and then I have to calibrate it, and I have to do this, and I have to learn a scanning pathway. So yes, there's no question, digital technology is a little bit more complex initially. And then I can make the argument, though, that digital technology is just as accurate, if not more accurate, than analog workflows. Now, I know there's quite a few articles that do say digital is more accurate. And there's also quite a few articles that say, you know what, in this application, analog is more accurate. No question. There is a balance between digital and analog. What the key is that digital gives us some X factor things that analog just can't do. Case in point, if you're making an impression, instead of using alginate or PVS impression, if I use a digital scanner, I can instantly see within seconds that I've captured the teeth properly. Versus with alginate, I have to wait 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or however long alginate takes to sit on. I don't know. It's been a long time since I made an alginate. But what happens is that, yeah, if I don't have the scan, and I'm using this, say my letter opener here is my intraoral scanner, and I go, don't got it, nailed it. So within seconds that it's accurate, or let me rephrase that. Within seconds that you've captured the data. And then the research is showing that pretty much any intraoral scanner on the market today is accurate. Okay. I know there's some slight differences and micron deviations and differences in certain applications, but come on, folks. All intraoral scanners in today's market are accurate enough for regular dentistry. So done. We've got that figured out. It's comfortable. It's less stress, faster, and assistants love to do it. Okay. So a big part of my practice with jumping into 3D printing, to get back on that topic of 3D printing, is that the intraoral scan is the key pathway to going forward with digital 3D printing. If you do not have an intraoral scanner, you're somewhat limited with how much 3D printing you can do. Yes, you can generate optical scans from a desktop scanner. Like if you have a desktop scanner for a laboratory environment, you can still do this, but you still then need to make a physical mold and then pour it up in a stone model, go to the desktop scanner. Then you have to compensate for shrinkage and expansions of your impression and stone retrospectively. So that's something to consider. Why would I do all that if I just directly image in the mouth? Now I get it. It's more expensive, no question. So that qualifies that as well. Additionally, patients just love it. Not having to shove your mouth full of impression material is the way to go. And then on top of that, everything that I do with digital technology, I tell the patient what I'm going to do. The patient goes, "What's that thing that you're putting in your mouth?" "Oh, that's my impression one. It takes pictures." "What? It takes pictures? Pictures? Wow, pictures." So yeah, absolutely, it takes pictures. So then I take your pictures and I bring it into a software. And then I can 3D print your teeth. What? 3D printing my teeth? You mean that's not just something that you can go ahead and 3D print like crazy things, or whatever, or things? I said, well, you can print crazy things too, but I'm using it for you. This is how I'm going to use this cool technology for you. And you know what happens is that one person will tell 2 or 3 other people, and those 2 or 3 other people turn into 5 or 6 people, and then it just kind of snowballs. And I now have people coming to me from hours away, 3, 4 hours away, because I can 3D print their teeth fast. Retakes and remakes is a big negative of the conventional workflows and pathways. No question, you have to rely upon a stone model. How many situations have we come up where you make the impression? Sure, I can make an impression, make a stone model, then all of a sudden your assistant pours it up, and then you've got a bubble in it. You're screwed. Or if you drop the model, or if it's sent to the lab, your courier picks it up, send it to the lab, and it falls off, the moped, or it gets dropped on the way. That's something to consider. Also, certainly some negatives of digital. Number one, money is expensive, no question. And then additionally, it's a little bit more challenging initially. It's not as simple at first. And then the labs do need to be calibrated. Okay, so how do I get started with 3D printing? How do you get started with 3D printing? First and foremost, as I mentioned before, evaluate your scanning options. You really have to make sure that we look at our scanners. Desktop scanner works, but an intraoral scanner, in my personal opinion, is a much, much better way of jumping into 3D printing. The reason for that is that, every time that you put a additional step into something, you're going to minimize the chance that you're going to use it. Case in point, even intraoral scanning. Say you buy this intraoral scanner and you're like, all right, I'm going to use it all the time. And then, it's set up in the corner. Or even worse, it's in a cabinet stored somewhere, or it's in your personal back office because you don't want people to steal it, or you don't want people to drop it or whatever. If it takes an extra X number of percentage of time versus just pulling out a can of alginate and mixing, you're not going to use the technology as much. So in my office, I have my intraoral scanner on a cart, plugged in, booted up, calibrated, Windows updates are done even before I walk in the office. That's a part of our opening routine in my practice, because the last thing you want to happen is halfway through a scan and Windows starts rebooting because you're doing a Windows update. All right, been there, done that. I know what it's like. And then you have to figure out how to do your reg edit and get in there to kill all these automatic restart things that Microsoft so happily put into the latest version of Windows. So yeah, desktop scanners, the big negative is you still need to make PBS impressions. Intraoral scanners directly make the impression, but you need it set up properly so that way when the patient looks at you and says, "Doctor, wow, that sounds great. Oh, wow. Bleaching trays? Oh, yeah, I'm willing to pay for that. When can I get started?" Or, "Doctor, veneer work or implants. When can I get started?" If anything is other than "how about right now," we're not using our technology properly. When I can look at a patient and said, "How about right now? I've got my scanner sitting over here. It just takes another 2-3 minutes. Then you'll be out the door done. We're ready to move forward with your dentistry. It'll save you an appointment for coming in next time." What? I mean, I can have my teeth 3D printed like today or next time? Wow, how cool is that? Additionally, you can use a cone beam scanner. So, if you're doing a lot of implant dentistry, implantology, or a variety of different things, yeah, you could use a cone beam scanner. You could also take a stone model and put it into a cone beam scanner, and you can do 3D printing from the cone beam scan of the stone model. You can even take alginate impression, put that into the cone beam machine, and cone beam scan alginate. Wow, you can do that? Yeah, absolutely. I could even take that patient's denture. And I can put the denture into the cone beam machine, scan it, and then duplicate the denture that way. Simple. It can't have locator parts inside of it, though, or any sort of the overdenture parts. So you do have to be aware of that. So nothing metal. So optical scanning is definitely the place to start. There's no question in my mind that optical scanning is what we need to do. Optical scanning is key, whether it's desktop or intraoral scanning, but prefer to be intraoral scanning. I use 3 intraoral scanners in my practice. I use the 3Shape Trios, the 3M True Definition scanner, and then also the Medit i500 scanner. And they're all really fabulous scanners. So they all work pretty well. Just whatever works best in your hands, I would encourage you to go ahead and consider using. So first thing is figuring out the scanning. My recommendation is just to go ahead and buy an intraoral scanner and make sure that you find one that works well in your hands and your practices. Number 2 thing is to go ahead and look at your manufacturing options for making things. So you have several different levels of 3D printers. You have the super affordable hobbyist level printer, things like this Anycubic Photon, and ramps all the way on up here to a production level 3D printer with kind of moderate costs. And if you want to make things, 3D printing does fit into this manufacturing world where, the highest costs, in my personal opinion, is going to be milling. And I don't think milling is going to be going away anytime soon, especially for ceramics and polymers. But zirconia 3D printing is just on the horizon. So there's no question in my mind that zirconia 3D printing, there are 3 companies currently with commercially available products for zirconia 3D printing for dentistry. So do consider where we're going to be heading in the next 2 to 10 years. It's going to be really impressive. So cost wise, you can get into 3D printing as low as just a couple of hundred US dollars. So 2, 3, 400 US dollars with buying something like this Anycubic photon. It works fantastic. It's a good little printer. You can print temporaries with it. You can print dentures. You can print models. The key is that, how good are you at pulling files from one place, downloading them, uploading them to another place, transferring things around, converting those files back and forth, plugging in a USB drive, figuring out how to use some third-party software like a slicer software, and then still getting it to print. And then figuring out on top of that, figuring out what's your print settings for the printer, meaning how much light exposed, your timing, the up and down forces. 99.9% of you will say, oh, I don't want to do any of that. Exactly. So there is a need for somewhere right around that hobbyist desktop production level category. So production 3D printing, such as like what would be like a Sprint Ray Pro 3D printer or a NextDent 3D printer, NextDent 5100. You're looking at the price range of somewhere on the low side of about 3,500 US dollars to a high side of about 15,000 US dollars, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then comparatively, the milling machines will be somewhere in that 20 to 60,000 US dollar cost range. As a whole broad range of different 3D printers. So it's something to consider. So our goal clinically is to take our scans and then do something with it. We're going to go ahead and generate a physical object using light. How cool is that? Can that be done on desktop level 3D printers? It can now. Yes, it is. A few years ago, we wouldn't be able to necessarily print true prosthetics, meaning teeth. The goal is always to go ahead and be able to print direct things that can be gone from the printer, wash, clean, cured, go to the mouth, meaning without having to do indirect analog workflows. And several years ago, a company by the name of NextDent started to develop ISO certified European brand resins that were biocompatible in the ISO certification level. And as a result, here in the United States, the FDA tends to recognize a lot of those certification levels, and many of those products have been registered here in the United States in our FDA system. So, over the past 2 to 3 years or so, there's been just an incredible breakneck pace of developing resins that can be 3D printed for temporaries, 3D printed for lots of different applications. And as a result, we have fused deposition modeling, which is one approach of how we can use 3D printing. Fused deposition modeling or fused filament modeling is an innovative technique where it takes basically liquid or thermoplasticized plastic. So you pull through a string and squirt it out onto a feeder mechanism. And that feeder mechanism builds an object by putting layers on top of a layer. And each layer is subsequently put on top of each other, and almost like icing on a cake. So that's something to consider. Fused deposition modeling doesn't really necessarily have the best applications for dentistry at this time. However, there's some very creative people over at our FONA. Justin Marks is a friend of mine, a really brilliant person, where you can 3D print flexible Valplast-like material. And it's very, very cool. So it's something to consider. Stereolithography is kind of the go-to technology of what we can use in dentistry. And the reason for that is a stereolithography takes a light source, and the light source will shine onto a box of liquid. And that light source can be controlled. So that way it can shine the light in just specific positions. So that way you can go ahead and build an object by subsequently putting a layer on top of each other layer. And what happens with that is that over time you'll build layers so that way you can go ahead and create a physical object. And stereolithography was actually the first and original 3D printing technology as pioneered by Chuck Hull. And that was the neat thing to see is that the first and original is still kind of the go-to that we use in dentistry today. So there's a few different flavors of stereolithography. We have laser stereolithography, or we have DLP stereolithography. DLP stereolithography, instead of using a laser beam source, it uses a light source from a projector. The projector shines in basically a box of liquid resin, and that projector shines light, curing that resin. And kind of the benefits of DLP versus SLA is that SLA needs to draw onto the square. So if this screen right here where you're seeing the video recording is my build platform, it needs to go like this, and draw all the way around. Where DLP, it basically goes boop, 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 and it prints much, much faster. So there's some benefits to DLP that in terms of speed, as well as the resin doesn't need to necessarily be as thick. So you can have very runny resin, which is a little bit easier to control with some peel processes and 3D printing and things of that nature. So there are some advantages to DLP. Additionally, there's some different flavors of DLP. One of those flavors is called continuous DLP. And continuous DLP, the 3D Systems company calls it figure 4 technology, but continuous DLP basically takes DLP, which is already fast, and it like turbocharges it. And it takes 3D printing time with DLP down by 30% of what traditional DLP printing time takes. And on top of that, what it does is it uses a semi-permeable membrane that is flexible. And it has a special kind of atmospheric controlled environment that controls the oxygen content on the inside of the 3D printer. So that way you can control your free radical formation during the 3D printing cycle. So the idea is by being able to control that, you can, number one, speed up printing, and then number two, it's a very low contact or no contact printing process. So there's no peeling effect that occurs. It's just basically a little as it grows. So what happens is that you can print fast and very delicate prints with continuous DLP. So taking a look at kind of the three big 3D printers of what you can use in a clinical dental environment. You have the Formlabs printer, the Form 2, Form 3. I show the Form 2 just as historical, but the Form 3 is kind of about the same price as the Form 2 was, so for about $3,500 US. Some benefits of it is the most affordable, at least of these three categories. It's simple and clean, and it is really the most automatic printer, arguably today. There's some other 3D printers out there, like from the Structo company, that has a complete automatic cycle, including UV curing and washing. That would probably be the most automatic 3D printer in dentistry, period. But this is the most automatic that you see here on the screen of what most people know as 3D printers. However, arguably it is the slowest printer. It is Denka denture resins only, and it does have the most consumables that you would see on here. It's also compared to that of the Moonray or Sprint Ray 3D printers. It's moderately affordable, medium speed, and it's open to most denture resins, which is a benefit. The Formlabs 3D printer can only print with the Denka resins, but with the Moonray Sprint Ray 3D printers, you can print with NextDent, Denka, Keystone, variety of different resins as well. It's a little bit clunkier to use. There's a smaller build platform, which is common in DLP as well, and it does have the most post-processing. The NextDent 3D printer, it is the fastest printer. It's like a Lamborghini. It is also the most expensive. It's simplest to post-process and is an incredibly reliable 3D printer. And at this time, it only uses the NextDent resins. So it is a ecosystem that is closed, only using the NextDent resins within their libraries and portfolios. And their resin tray is also relatively expensive. So some things to consider when you're looking at 3D printing in your dental office or your laboratory, et cetera. As I mentioned before, you can really get in pretty affordably in 3D printing, and especially if you look at a printer like the Anycubic Photon, delivered with Prime or with free shipping, $270 US for a 3D printer off of Amazon. You really can't go wrong. But it's a good way to start, especially in very cost-conscious countries and places around the world where, spending, you have to be careful with your spending as well. And that's true here in the United States here as well, especially in this COVID world where dental offices are shut down and people are just sitting around. So I get it. There's no money coming in, so we have to be very cautious. So this is a kind of a good way and fun way to begin with 3D printing. And, play around with it. If you are the type of user, like I mentioned before, where you can go ahead and take your iPhone and sync it to your Windows computer and sync it to your Android tablet, and they all talk to each other, calendars and sync contacts, then you're probably ready for this type of 3D printing. But if you're the type of doctor, clinician, technician, et cetera, that you say to yourself, I just want to go ahead and click on iCloud and it just automatically just connects, then there's a price to pay for that. And that price is interconnectivity and usability. And in my opinion, that's worth it. So stepping up from a printer like this, which is a good introductory 3D printer, going to something that's a little bit more expensive, could serve you really well by a time savings as well as predictability savings as well. Then additionally, 1, evaluate your scanners. 2, evaluate your 3D printer manufacturing options. 3, evaluate your software options. So I was an early pioneer in using open architecture experimental software, things like Autodesk Mesh Mixer, Blender, Tinkercad, Google SketchUp, variety of different softwares that were free. And both of those softwares, Blender and Mesh Mixer, are free. And I was probably user number 1 for Mesh Mixer in dentistry. It was like super early. And I had to teach myself how to do it. And thankfully, I figured out a lot. And I encourage you to check out my YouTube channel. I've got a bunch of videos on there on how to use Mesh Mixer. And if you need additional detailed help on how to use Mesh Mixer, check out our online course, learndental3d.com. And then on top of that, you can also make an argument that, I could spend hours figuring out how to design a bite guard in Mesh Mixer, or I can just purchase Exocad or 3Shape, and then in 15 minutes, I can have designed a occlusal guard. Now there is a price for that. So just like there's a price for iCloud and some interconnectivity, you got to think about, if I'm doing enough cases, I can justify the cost of specific software to do those tasks. But start by downloading Mesh Mixer. Go download it right after this presentation and go watch my YouTube channels. And then you can go ahead and get started doing some basic tasks in Mesh Mixer. And I can tell you, I've done some very complicated dentistry in Mesh Mixer, including full arch wax ups for all-on-4 bridges. And it's not that hard. It's just, you got to learn some of the basics. And, the question is it ready for everyday dentistry? Well, maybe not. Can you do a screw retained final bridge of an all-on-4 in Mesh Mixer? Yeah, you can. The question is that, what's your sanity level going to be like after that? So I don't know. There's an argument for just paying a little bit for software or potentially outsourcing design. And as I mentioned here, the open architecture systems, things like Google SketchUp, MeshLab, Blender, NetFab was an earlier one as well. But what happens is that you can do full waxing. In this particular case is with Mesh Mixer. And it looks and feels just like you're working in Exocad or in 3Shape or in things of that nature. And what happens is when you take a look at how everything here plays out, we know that there's some value to these workflows and how you work. And these softwares are free. There's no annual maintenance costs. And then you compare that with the Exocad, 3Shape dental wings. Some of these softwares can be very expensive, $1,500 all the way up to $10,000 just to buy the software. And then on top of that, you have to pay yearly fees if you want to update it, if you want to have the latest versions, et cetera. So, there are significant costs that go along with these things. But if it's a part of your business model, those costs are worth it. If it's a part of something you do every day, it's worth it. But if you're getting started with 3D printing, don't buy billions of things and spend a bunch of money. Maybe buy the printer, play around with it a little bit and say, this is fun, or I hate this. And then you can make a decision about spending money and doing all those things. As I mentioned before, necessity is the mother of invention, development, things of that nature. So, what it comes down to is I got started very early on with what was something clinical needs. A patient comes into me and says, doctor, I hate all that goo. No problem. I'll scan you. Doctor, can you make me a bleaching tray? Absolutely. I can make you bleaching trays. This was super early 3D printing. On this particular case was a Form 1 3D printer, and then making a bleaching tray. And magically it fits. Start with something that's so benign and reversible that if it gets screwed up, you're not going to screw up the patient. And then you can elevate yourself to doing things in dentistry. Occlusal guards and bite guards are a very, very good way to begin. with 3D printing. And I just published an article this morning on my my blog, which is fasttrackdentalce.com, and then click on the articles page or the articles link at the top of the right of the page. So fasttrackdentalce.com and click on articles. And I have an article that I just published here today about 3D printing occlusal guards. And I've just kind of, talked about my story and some of the newer materials that have just come out. So I encourage you to go check that out. Occlusal guards and 3D printing occlusal guards is really a wonderful way to go ahead and get started with 3D printing. Why? Reversible. And then you can go ahead and say, well, a big part of my practice is removable. No problem. You can 3D print models that you can go ahead and do your partial models on. Maybe you don't want to start out with 3D printing metal like stereo or selective laser melting or sintering. So yeah, you could 3D print that frame right now, but maybe you're not ready to do that just yet. 3D print the model. Then go ahead and do a traditional wax and cast approach. Start out smart. Do a Kennedy Class 3, maybe Mod 1 RPD. Don't do a Kennedy Class 1 or Kennedy Class 2 partial with a distal extension. Those are hard to image. Get experienced with doing a tooth-supported partial, then go into something like this, which is a tissue-supported partial. Then jump into something like digital dentures. And this right here is doing a digital locator over denture. So scanning that denture 360 degrees, learn that approach, figure out how it is. Then 3D print the teeth. Okay, maybe start out by 3D printing just a single denture and trying in the mouth, seeing if that workflow works. Don't separate the teeth because you typically need exocad or 3Shape to go ahead and do what you see here on the screen. And then take that and then take it to the patient, try it. Maybe try with an implant case before you go into full arch fixed, okay? And then the key is to start looking at your typical week of what you can do in your practice from a typical week point of view. Whether it's milling individual crowns, 3D printing an arch of temporaries, or 3D printing a denture based upon whatever workflow that you've practiced. I'm a big fan of not jumping deep into the deep end just yet, but just kind of tiptoeing a little bit so that way I can make sure that I don't do something that I'm going to harm or injure the patient. Number one is my expectation is here in my practice. I need to at least deliver this. Hopefully my digital technology will give me exceeding expectation. But what I don't want to do is my expectations here and then I deliver this. You just don't want that. That's bad news. So the key is also make sure you have fun while doing this. And the last couple slides is just to kind of show you what we have here. Take a cone beam, throw something in the cone beam machine. If you don't have a cone beam machine, find a friend who's got one. If you don't have an intraoral scanner, find a friend who's got one. Use their intraoral scanner. Don't let that limitation get in the way. Find ways around your limitations, whether it's financial, access, indifference, or fear. The key is that inspire yourself, have fun, because video games are fun for me. That was my inspiration for computers. Wow, video games, okay. My inspiration for computers was also saying, I don't like cursive. I don't like doing arithmetic. I want to use a calculator. All right, I get it. Okay, I know I need to know how to, multiply 5 by 2. All right, whatever, I can do that. But if you tell me multiply by like 49 by 52, I'm like, who cares? I'll just use a calculator. So what happens is that take a look. But engage your patients. Have fun with these things. Engage your patients. So I did a little giveaway for this rubber ducky here at one of our events. 3D print little bite forks, things that replace the things that annoy you in your practice. 3D print an X-ray mount or holder in your practice. 3D print a computer bracket for your scanner cart. 3D print light fixtures in your office, like I did right there. Those are pendant lights in my office, my waiting room. They're all 3D printed. Then 3D print an iPhone holder that can take my iPhone and put it into and give that away to patients. I put my logo on that thing. I give away to patients. The key is that we have to have fun. And, when we're kind of learning together, we're growing together. And I sincerely hope that everybody's had fun tuning into our presentation here today. And I encourage you, if you have any questions, reach out to me on Facebook, on social media, or check out some of my articles and posts that I do on fasttrackdentalce.com. And I sincerely hope and I sincerely appreciate being able to host this presentation here today. I hope it's been enjoyable. I know that the team, Dr. Coral and the team also had some time here. I've got about the next 10 minutes or so for question and answers. So we can go ahead and take some questions and answers now if anybody would like to.
Okay. So thank you so much, Dr. Michael, for the beautiful session and sharing the technology, the latest technology, which we are all having in hands, moreover. And it was quite impressing that, like, the idea, people usually what they do, they are engaged in playing games, but taking out ideas or the helping things out of those games, it's quite interesting. So with this, we have some questions to answer.
While you're looking that up too, I'll speak and comment on that for a moment because it's interesting. My father and my mother were very, very ahead of their time at the time in the mid 80s. Everybody was always saying back then, it's like, the video game is going to rot your brains. Well, we still hear that today. Computers, they're bad for you. You're going to not learn how to script. You're not going to learn how to have cursive, and your mind's going to rot. And my parents are like, nah, just that's the future. Computers are the future. You need to get on that thing. So thankful that I had the opportunity that, I was able to do that, and be able to jump onto computers pretty early. But they also saw that I played a lot of video games, and now they weren't happy that I was playing, games, shooting people and doing all that stuff. Now there's a big difference between playing the game and doing these other crazy things like these people do. So you got to have strong parents. With that being said, we also have to recognize that playtime is learning time.
Definitely, I think all the parents would be taking this key as sure, and won't be stopping their childs to invent something new out of those games actually.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have a question from Dr. Parth. How to proceed with CBCT scans and 3D printing?
So the best way to get started with cone beam scanning and 3D printing is to find a friend that has a cone beam scanner and a 3D printer, or maybe two different people. Or maybe one person's got a cone beam scanner, the other person's got a 3D printer. Get together, have some fun, have some tea, coffee, beers, whatever. And then just bring the printer to the cone beam scanner. It's a little harder to bring the cone beam scanner to the printer. And I don't know, just throw some things in the cone beam scanner and scan it. Just bring something like a denture, bring like a rubber ducky, bring something like a little flower and put it into the cone beam scanner. Same thing is true of an intraoral scanner. Find somebody who's got one, go to their office, say, hey, scan me. Okay. And then just try it. Honestly, have some fun with it. Or if you don't have any of those friends that do have the technology, go to a trade show, go to a course at the trade show. You can play with the scanners, maybe not the cone beam machines, but you can play at least with the scanners. At a course, you can take a course on cone beam. You can take a course on 3D printing. We host courses in California, and it's a little hard to get to from international, but we've had a lot of international students come to our courses in California. But yeah, you can go to a course where there's cone beam scanning. It can scan you. Or 3D print, whatever. So that's a great way to get started.
Okay, so it might also be the future for facial prosthetics, right?
Oh, absolutely. I didn't have a chance to show some of the slides, but as a prosthodontist, I occasionally get to do some, not so much facial prosthetics, but intraoral obturators and prosthetics to obturate things inside the mouth. The facial prosthetics, I typically refer to a maxillofacial prosthodontist, but there's nothing to be said that you can't take your intraoral scanner and scan an ear. You can use your iPhone with the Bellis app and just scan your face, and then I can go ahead and 3D print. Now, the Bellis app's not going to be accurate enough to do prosthetics on, but you can combine a cone beam scan. I could cone beam scan somebody's face and then turn the soft tissue into a 3D printable file. You can then segment out an ear, do a mirroring tool, all in Mesh Mixer. I can mirror an ear within seconds. I could have a digital mock-up of an ear for the other side. And I know because when I was in my prosthodontics residency, like I had to go do my maxillofacial rotations, and I'd be sitting there like making an Algene impression. I'm like, I had to make the Algene impression on my face, and then I had the straws coming into my nose. And I'm like, oh my God, there's got to be a better way than this. This is ridiculous. And then on top of that, I'm sitting hours waxing an ear, and then they're failing me because my ear, I'm like, it's not a mirrored image of the thing. And I'm like, I kept going back to the video game saying, I'm like, there's got to be a better way than this, dude. So you just take an ear, scan it. Within 6 seconds, I can flip the image, and then boom, I've got a wax up. Oh, but young Dr. Scherer, you're not going to learn how to wax up. Okay, I get it. You know what? I still, as a university professor, I believe in certain fundamental tasks, like getting in there and doing waxing with wax. Okay. But I'm not saying you need to do it 60 million times to get good at these things. I'm saying sometimes the person that can come up with the lazy approach is actually the genius.
Definitely, sir. Definitely. Basics are actually the key, but yeah, when you're having technology, why to waste your time also? Okay. So next question we have from Dr. Govind. Can we calibrate the STL data by iOS or directly synchronize with printing software? Or even times we can have to do the processing on the ad software?
Great question. So the question is that how would we be able to go ahead and take that intraoral scan data and reliably convert it over so that way when we 3D print something, it's going to come out accurate. And the good news is that the vast majority, all intraoral scanners these days allow you to get to STL files. So it used to be a couple of years ago, you'd have to go ahead and do some conversions and back and forth and things of that nature. And the last holdout was Dentsply Sirona and Seric. But as long as you have the Seric software 4.5 or higher, you can export STL data at the model phase in your Seric software. But what happens is that, you do need to be careful. So when you grab your STL files from your intraoral scanner and you put it in a mesh mixer, you can't scale the image. Anytime that you scale your optical scan, it's screwing it up. So it was interesting too, because I worked a lot with Formlabs and SprintRay early on in the development of their software. And it was so easy in the early Formlabs software to grab the scale tool. And I had to tell them, by the way, when you put the file into the 3D printer software, that little arrow that's right there is so easy to grab. Dentists don't want to scale things. We don't want to scale our models before 3D printing. We want them to be the same as they're in the mouth. So the reality is there's a lot more nuances to that about how we consider and maintain accuracy levels of our intraoral scan to our 3D printed models. There's a lot of studies on that. Actually, well, some studies. There's not a ton of studies, but there's a fair number of studies out there about reliability of 3D printers. And it's kind of all over the place, unfortunately. Intraoral scanners are pretty darn accurate across the board. 3D printers, not the case. 3D printers, there's a lot more variability, and it could be as simple as, I'm going to go ahead and 3D print my denture, and maybe I'm going to have my denture sitting flat versus at this angle versus printing it vertically, on the print platform. There's so many variances and nuances about accuracy and being able to maintain accuracy of that. So that's kind of a difficult question to answer. And do this, and then you get this, and it works. But for the most part, I can rely upon my intraoral scanner. The cone beam is a little bit trickier because you have to convert that to make sure that that's one-to-one. But intraoral scan data to printable model is pretty reliable. It can be done pretty easily using Mesh Mixer, 3Shape, or like in the Rayware software, there's some additional software out there that's dentistry specific, where you grab intraoral scan data, go straight into the printer software, no Mesh Mixer or anything, and then you've got a model. Pretty awesome.
That's really nice. And I hope in near future that will be replacing all impression materials.
I'm a firm believer that it is a matter of time before physical impression material is gone. Do I think it will be going away anytime soon? Probably not. And the reason for that is for crown and bridge dentistry, I think there's no reason to use PVS anymore. Zero. Okay. I do singles, doubles, full arches, everything for crown and bridge. Implant dentistry, you can make an argument. There's some variability that occurs with scan bodies and some issues with scan bodies and transferring digital data and alignment algorithms and things of that nature. In addition, with with dentures, with removable intraoral scanning directed dentulous arches is fraught with peril. It can be done. I've done it all the time, but 9 times out of 10, maybe 8 times out of 10, it works. But 1 or 2 times out of 10, you're like, I can't make this happen. So a big part of what I do and what I train people to do is to use a combination of PVS and digital scanning to make digital dentures. And for the foreseeable future, until some additional technology is developed, I think for dentures will be, and implant dentistry will still be present, but it's a matter of time before even those are gone.
Definitely, sir. Definitely.
And I have
Next,
time for probably just one more question. So let's make it a good one. Let's pick a good one.
okay, Doctor. We have question from Dr. Amar. How about ASIGA 3D printer?
A what?
ASIGA,
Oh, the
ASIGA.
okay, gotcha. So there's quite a few different 3D printers out there that are at that kind of production level 3D printing category, and it's tough to kind of talk all of them. What I can tell you is that there's a lot of different brands out there. The doctor was asking about the Asiga or Asiga 3D printer. Asiga makes wonderful 3D printers, excellent 3D printer that has a good reputation in the dental laboratory space as well. I'm not partial to any 3D printer. I am, not on this presentation, this wonderful presentation paid by any 3D printer company to tell their products whatsoever. I'm a firm believer in making sure that you choose something that works well for you. There's pros and cons of a printer like the Nextent, like the Sprint Ray, like the Asiga, like the Stratasys, all the other different printer companies. The key is make sure you find one that works for you. Typically, how it works is that somebody should look at the materials that are available for that 3D printer, meaning what can I print on that brand? Okay. And then is that lineup of materials the right thing for me in my practice, wherever it may be? So case in point, like the Nextent 3D printer, some people get kind of like, oh my God, Nextent printer, I can only print Nextent materials. That's ridiculous. That doesn't matter to me because I own one of the printers, because there's a huge lineup of Nextent materials. You can literally do everything with the Nextent materials. And I have 9, soon to be 11 3D printers in my practice. Okay. And why do I keep buying more printers? Okay. It's because when a new technology comes out, it comes out with a new indication that's something that I can use for my patients in my practice. And there's a benefit to that. So what happens is that Nextent came out of the printer. I bought that. So there's a reason. Printer speed, continuous DLP. Formlabs came out with their Formlabs. Boom, there's a reason that Sprint Ray, I can print key splint material. Awesome. Okay, there's a reason why you do this. Now, in an ideal world, sure, I'd love to buy just one printer and everything works on that. I don't have to change it out. But then again, there is an argument to be said about having multiple 3D printers, especially affordable ones. Because if you have one printer, something like a Carbon printer, which is a fabulous printer. Don't get me wrong. Carbon 3D makes a wonderful printer, but it is 5,000 US dollars a month in a lease model. That's the USA pricing. And you have a minimum of 36 months of a lease, to my knowledge, unless that's changed. And I apologize, Carbon, if it has changed, but that's my understanding. So at the end of that 3 years, you pay basically 160 to 180,000 US dollars, and you don't own the printer. So $180,000, you don't own the printer. What are you printing for that? That's a lot of money. Versus if you were saying to myself, okay, if that printer works consistently that whole 3 years, maybe that's worth it. But you can also make the argument, I can buy 18 other printers, at a $10,000 price range. So if one goes down, I got 17 others. I think that math worked out. Hold on, I got to get out my calculator here and make sure that it adds up. So no, there's the justification there. Maybe it's not the Carbon versus others. Maybe you look at it and say, okay, should I buy a Asiga at 15,000 US dollars, or should I buy 5 Formlabs 3D printers? Totally up to you what you're going to print and what you're looking for. I hope that helps.
Yes, sir. So I think with this, you charge the patients also a lot more.
I don't. So I actually charge my patients less. So when I tend to look at something like occlusal guards, and this is the part of that post, if you want to go check it out, fasttrackdentalc.com, just go to the articles. I literally posted today about costs of 3D printing occlusal guards. You can make an argument that when you go into 3D printing, your costs go down. Part of that is that you look at 3D printing. Yeah, I got to buy the printer. Yeah, I got to buy the scanner. The scanner pays for itself with crown and bridge dentistry. The 3D printer, and it's hard to argue, but I do believe that the 3D printer pays for itself with occlusal guards and splints and things of that nature. So what happens is that, say your price is whatever for a bite splint, and the laboratory, say it's 500 US dollars, it's a round number, maybe whatever it is. And your laboratory charges 200 US dollars for that bite guard. Okay. So your material costs and everything. So it's about $300 difference, etc. So then you go into 3D printing. If you 3D print your own occlusal guard, my cost goes from $200 of a lab bill down to 10 US dollars to 3D print the occlusal guard. Okay. So now, yeah, I have to take my time to design the guard and clean it, do all that.
Definitely.
But then again, in a post-COVID world, when we're a little bit slower, maybe I have more time to do things like that. And as a result, I will drop my price, and I have. Maybe my first 10 occlusal guards, I won't drop my price because it'll help pay for the cost of the printer using Elon Musk Tesla strategy. Your first few is going to be expensive to pay for the R&D and everything. Then you drop your price so that way you can expand to more needy patients, patients that don't have the financial resources. So, when you do that, we increase access of care to the technology access to care to more patients, which I know is critical in cost-conscious environments.
Definitely.
So, Dr. Kroll, I thank you. I think I do need to run, so it's really been awesome. So I'll let you take it over from here, and thank you for letting me come
No
in.
problem, sir. No problem. And I really thank you for taking such a beautiful session for all of us. So thank you
It's
so much, sir, and also stay safe.
You as well. And I sincerely hope that you and everybody who's tuning in here is safe in this crazy world that we're in right now. And I know we're all going to make it through. And the key is that when we get through this, maybe we've learned a couple things over this break, and what you all are doing with the entire educational webinar series and this entire online summit is really inspiring. So thank you for allowing me to join.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. So with this, we'll move on to the commencement of this session, as well as I would like to guide all the participants to reach to www.gomha.org for further certificates, participation, as well as speakers schedules. So kindly stay tuned because we are lined up with more beautiful speakers there. So thank you so much, sir, for the session.
Have a good day.
Thank you, sir.